Hey, folks, welcome back. It's Sadesh, your host here on the Cloud Stream by VMware. And I am really excited. We have the opportunity to host another member of my team, David. David has a really interesting career. He started out in the trenches like most of us. And David, would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and then I have some questions for you.
All right. Hey, Sadesh, and hello, everyone. It's nice to be here with you today. I'm David Jasso. I'm a coworker of Sadesh. I'm on the multi-cloud solution team on the marketing side, and I focus on a lot of different things, all related to multi-cloud, just as Sadesh does here.
Yeah. So, David, when we started talking, one of the things that really kind of interested me, and I asked most folks this, is how'd you get your start? What led you to sort of multi-cloud as the apex of your career here? And what are some of the things that you kind of learned or observed along the way that kind of helped you figure out what you were going to become ultimately?
Yeah. You and I have chatted a number of times on things, and it's like I've got one of these long, windy, twisty roads kind of careers. I'll give a quick sketch on it. My undergrad was industrial design, which I love, but decided I wasn't going to do anything with once I got out. Just probably like 90% of people that go to college. I got into programming. I did a lot of programming, at the time, and I wound up doing some consulting work, and I did a lot of stuff related to aviation planning consulting. So I was involved with land use work and, all database related, and survey work, and then a lot of statistical projects. But then I started, hey, I really should do something more useful with my life. And I decided to go back and get my MBA because I had a good technical foundation, but I didn't have any particular domain expertise.
Yeah, like industry knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, this is all kind of useful hand kit of tools and stuff, but I really should probably match it with something. So I got my MBA and I focused on finance, and coming out, and you and I were talking about this too. I went to work for a company called Mervyn's, which doesn't exist anymore.
I miss that place.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like they're great.
Child of the 90s.
Great pants.
Right? Yes. Right.
So I worked they were a Dayton Hudson company, and anybody knows Dayton Hudson knows that they own Target. And so I worked for them. A funny story about that, in Target was competing with Walmart.
Yeah.
But Dayton Hudson split its bet between Mervyn's and Target. And so they underfunded Target, and Walmart took off.
I didn't realize that they were competing brands because
the Walmart grew out of the sort of the rural into the suburbs, and Target grew out of the center of the city into the suburbs, and they were both competing and trying to build stores, and Target just couldn't get enough money because they were spending on Mervyn's, and Mervyn's was bankrupt
in the malls
5 years later.
Yeah, that's really good to know.
Anyway, I decided retail was not for me, and a coworker was at Hewlett Packard, so I went to join them at Hewlett Packard, and it was a long time at Hewlett Packard. Started off in the finance and controllership area. Did a ton of things there, sort of exploring. It was a massive company, so you could sort of have an entire career there by just moving around. So I did the controllership thing, and then I went to work doing data warehousing projects for customer support. Came back. I had the privilege to work for the general counsel at Hewlett Packard. I was IT and finance manager for him.
Okay.
And that was great fun. That was probably one of the best jobs I had.
So why was,
Go ahead, sure.
Yeah. What was interesting about that particular?
Well, first of all, I was working for like a senior vice president, and I was still, early in my career, basically. Okay. So I was at corporate, and I was meeting with, the senior execs, whenever there was anything legal related. I got to travel. I was like, I was going to New York probably 3-4 times a year. I love New York. That was so fun. Yeah. And it's just so cool working at that level because I got to see all kinds of things. The company was changing rapidly. Right around that time, they did the test and measurement spin out for anybody that knows Hewlett Packard. it was just a really interesting time to be part of the company. We were competing with Sun. There was, so I had this visibility at the senior exec level to all kinds of things that I never would have had if I hadn't been there.
Right.
But it was, again, one of these moments where you go, I just don't want to be at corporate anymore. I've been there for a while. And
right.
Like, I need to get out to the real businesses. Right. So, and then I went and I did a marketing ops job. From there, I took a job. We were getting into middleware at the time. And I was working for the general manager of that group, working with finance. Working with R&D and marketing, sort of in that middle ground, focused on release management. That was a great experience.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we entered the market. When we entered the market, there were 24 middleware companies. By the time we exited the market, 18 months later, there were 3.
Right.
And we weren't one of them.
Right.
So that was a great experience. I worked for the CTO of HP Software after that, and I worked on a lot of acquisitions.
Yeah,
that was fun. That was really a great experience. Learned a lot about how companies think and how do you go about filling a gap in technology and
the strategy of what do you do with this new cog in the wheel?
Exactly.
How does it work?
And also thinking about, like, what do we want to be when we grow up, and like who's out there to fill those gaps, and do we do this organically or inorganically, and like what makes sense to do and how long would it take? At one point, I was looking at 3 different technologies. At one point, it's funny, I was negotiating with Intel around some technology. We were looking at some acquisition buys, and I was part of a team that was running a skunkworks to build the technology that we were looking at. This was all pre-cloud. It was all about how do you automate the data center. And it was fun. It was just a great job.
Nice.
Then I decided, like, okay, I've jumped around enough. I've got like so many different careers under my belt.
Experiences,
I better focus. So I got into marketing, and I just stayed there. I started in industry marketing, focused on financial services. Then I was product marketing for an area called configuration management databases. This is all in
CMDB.
Exactly, CMDB.
That was during, or I guess the ITIL era never ended.
ITIL era, right?
When it was
like
hot.
Now we're in ITIL 3, but nobody ever talks about it anymore.
Right, exactly. Now it's all about Agile, and people are very confused how you do that. So
exactly, and there are some good explanations, but really nobody. It's like Latin.
Yeah,
understanding
that's right, because it is from an era of everything was declared. If there was a server, you needed to tell somebody there was a server,
and you needed like these incredibly arcane processes to do everything. And a lot of that stuff still. The process, the theory still work, but you just have to think of like 90% of what was not standard is now standard, right? It's all just part of the process, and it's well documented. And
commoditization of that.
You don't need to worry about it, right? So don't think about it. And then I left Hewlett Packard. I came over to VMware when they were just getting into operations management. Helped launch that. A lot of people that ran that business and came from Hewlett Packard. So shout out to my old GM there, Ramin Sayer, who's over at God, all of a sudden forget it. Sumo Logic, basically, and took that company public. So that was fun, and we had launched that business. It went from not too much to multi-billions since we started that. I think that's a great success story. And then was in the enterprise management space for a long time, and then came over to corporate. Long story, but it's like it all makes sense in some way.
Basically, like the arc is you start off with a background in industrial tech, go back, retool, get some experience with finance, start in understanding how these larger organizations are operating, get into some M&A, and then start to focus a little bit more on the area of interest in terms of marketing and strategy. I think that's really a good synopsis. Now, one thing that I was particularly interested in, and that you're working on, is some great research topics. And there are a couple of things for our audience that I think they should know. Right, part of our work is actually studying how people make buying decisions, understanding patterns in the technology and frameworks that are emerging, and then understanding how we translate that for the marketplace, right? And you and I know it's like being on a treadmill on 10, at maximum incline, because things change quickly in tech, especially in the multi-cloud marketplace. And I think that leads up to the research that you're working on. And I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So just a quick question: are you getting the feedback, or is it just me? Is it
no? I don't.
Okay,
yeah,
I can live with it. I'm just getting some feedback on my side.
Yeah.
So research, really, you kind of hit on it. It's about two purposes. One is you're trying to learn and understand. It's like anything. It's sort of the scientific method. You've got some hypothesis, so you want to validate it, and so research is a great way to do it. And you do it for understanding trends in what's happening, and then it becomes useful in a couple of ways. One is it gives you a way to connect back to your audience, because everybody that's out there, everybody that lives, is always asking this question, especially if you're in business: how do I compare to X, right? So research helps you figure that out. It also tells you where you've got gaps in your products, or where you're spot on with your products, and you should just reinforce what you're doing. So it's just very useful. This research grew out of an area of focus that I'm involved in, which is around, for multi-cloud, what competencies matter, right? It's so you have to then start looking at, okay, what does it mean to be in multi-cloud? And you back out, and there's an aspect of this that's about any cloud, right? So there's a set of competencies that should exist no matter what cloud you're on. And because cloud use is directly derivative, flows right out of this whole notion of the applications and what's best for the applications, you actually have to understand, okay, what does it take to be good at applications? What's the point of worrying about where your apps run if they suck?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's doesn't matter where they run. It not going to make any difference, right?
I mean, the translation of that is: are the apps that you're working on, are they valuable for business ops? Right?
Do they meet the needs of the business, and in a way that people would expect them to meet the needs of the business today? Because technologies change. You and I were talking about this. The way you build them change, and they change for a reason. And you need to stay current with those things. So the framework's 8-point framework. We look at cloud adoption routes, how are you using cloud services, or what we used to call PaaS, DevOps practices. I'm looking at a little note here that I have. Data center strategies, like modernizing it, because that's an important part of cloud now. Financial management practices, other governance practices, a whole set of things you need to do to sort of have good hygiene in the cloud. Strategies around consolidation, and also consolidation of tools and processes and things like that. And then cloud security. It's always got to be part of something, right? Security is one of these challenges that continues to exist. It's part of everything. Everybody's responsible. Nobody's responsible.
Right.
So that's a critical area. And we did the survey to understand. We had developed this framework internally based on best expertise within the company, and then we wanted to then sort of get additional information from the marketplace around where are they, because it's all about maturity, right? We can say, hey, we think you should be here, and here are the stages, but the market really has to tell you how well informed that is, right? So that was the point of the research.
So two questions that kind of pop into my head. First of all, you mentioned internal kind of teams and stuff that help inform the research, and I think, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do want to make sure.
But you will.
But I will. I mean, that's the nature of the show. But the teams that help inform that, are you thinking about solution engineering? Are you thinking about
it's a broad range of technical expertise. CTOs in the company, solution architects in the company, people that are involved in aspects that cover all those things, from application development through cloud use. So we did a pretty broad survey of asking people, what do you think matters?
Yeah.
And then my role really was to distill it into something. Okay, you've got this framework, you've got this idea. What's sort of common and what makes sense as a
What are the
broad
threads?
framework?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Stitching it together. So that was what we did. And I have a lot of feedback.
I think we're good. I haven't heard any of the feedback.
I'll keep going. I think when we talk, you go ahead, ask your next question. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So
rambling on.
Yeah, the second question I had was kind of the follow on. Like, the reason that I think this is interesting is, so we go out and we pull a bunch of customers in our customer base, right? And we ask them questions around, what's your adoption cycle? How are you planning? What are your challenges, et cetera, et cetera. As you think about those eight steps, what are the top 2 or 3 where you kind of said, hey, it's surprising that we got the information we got here, or this is the common knowledge is that you don't do this, but you do this, but it turns out that a lot of folks are actually going ahead and ignoring that common knowledge, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Any particular area?
Yeah, no, I think the first thing that was really striking. As I said, you start with a hypothesis, right? So our hypothesis is that people are going multi-cloud in a big way, and they're on the path to that, right?
Okay.
And you go, well, what does multi-cloud mean? So every analyst says multi-cloud. They have their definitions 2+ clouds, and like, well,
right?
Who cares, right? Because unless a team is actually using more than one cloud, they're mono cloud, right? They're like, they don't have any of these problems of like complexity, because it's like it doesn't exist to them. It's like the enterprise is looking down at the enterprise, and you go, oh, I see 2 clouds, but you look sideways and you see people and they're all using one cloud. So it's like, so our hypothesis is that's going to change, right? People are going to start to use 2 clouds. We had 3 bellwether questions that were really trying to get at that. One was, do you have teams that have people that have to be peaked on more than one cloud? And we didn't ask it exactly like that, because you have to be super careful in how you ask these questions, right?
Right.
So basically, are there team members, from a team that actually owns a portfolio or one app, or usually a portfolio of apps, that have to work on both Amazon and AWS, or Amazon and Google? And so, because that's a great indicator that people are really at the team level starting to be multi-cloud. Right. We also asked them if they had apps that were dependent on more than one environment, right? So it's like, do you have any apps that are more dependent on more than one environment? And then the third question was, let's see. So, or is your team responsible for applications? Are there teams that are responsible for applications that run on more than one cloud? So you take that combination, and those are great like indicators that the market's moving from this multi-cloud but mono-cloud at the team level to teams being multi-cloud, which is where the rubber hits the road. And in each of those, it was like 3 out of 4 said yes to each of those, basically. So now, we didn't ask them how pervasive, right? Because there's sort of limited number of questions. We were asking them a lot of topics, but that's to me a significant bellwether that the market is moving away from this mono cloud use at the team level to multi-cloud use. And that's great, because that's our theory of the market, and that's what we're building products for. And that was a great piece of information, basically.
Yeah, no, I think what's great about this is that I like to highlight what we do and how we come to service the marketplace, right, with our solutions. But I think part of that is understanding the journey we take, right? What is it that we do, and how do we get some of that research and information? I think one of the differentiators for VMware is that we have a large enterprise legacy install base, which is no surprise to anyone. And if you're coming from a cloud service provider, you may not have the same challenges from your perspective. If you're an employee over there, as an install base might have as they're making those decisions. And I think one of the questions that kind of comes to mind is, does your survey indicate what's driving that multi-cloud kind of usage or adoption, or was that not part of the
no? What we were mostly checking in this survey was against those practice areas. Like questions were like, hey, here are 8 practices. Is your organization doing any of these? And so we did that along all the practice areas. We weren't looking for necessarily causes in the survey. one of the challenges with surveys is you can ask 20 questions, maybe, right? Or
right, and then people are like, "We're done."
Yeah, exactly, and they have to be super concise, and so we didn't get into causes in this. There are other surveys we have done in VMware that really do look at that, and I think the most heavily cited, and this means lots of different things, right? You really have to get on the covers, but is this notion of access to innovation, right? It's like, I really want to be with this guy because I love the services they have in this particular area, this cloud,
right,
and I want to be on this. I have to say, historically, but a bigger driver has been just preference of teams, right? It's like, hey, we love Microsoft, right?
right.
And it's like,
It's
or we
people.
hate Microsoft,
Yeah,
right? And it's like, so let's go do AWS, right?
Right.
So that's still a big driver, but I think more and more teams are like having to embrace for all kinds of reasons. One is access to innovation, but also it's like they inherit a portfolio, right? They inherit a portfolio because there was an acquisition or there was a merger or something. And it's like, no, they're on Amazon and you're you're on Azure. There isn't enough justification to move that stuff. It's just as there wasn't. There was always business cases against moving certain things to the cloud. There's huge business cases against moving from cloud to cloud as well. It's just like if it's not going to give you anything, there are costs, and so you have to then you just say, we'll run it here. It's like, so I think there's a lot of, and there are tons of those kinds of issues. But there's I think part of it is when it's a proactive decision, it's like, because we think that's the best environment. And then there are a lot of reactive decisions that are tied to just like, it's there, we got to run it. Let's not worry about moving it because it's not worth it.
I think it's probably a good idea for us to shift into my my fun part of the show, which is great to hear about the work you're doing. One of my questions that I always ask my guests is there a particular area of passion outside of tech or interests that you have? What do you work on when you're not thinking about the strategy for multi-cloud?
I was thinking about, we were chatting about sort of like, hey, what's interesting, what do you do, that sort of thing before, and we've had some conversations about this. For me, I was thinking about, it's like passion's a very tough word for me because I don't think in those kinds of terms, like, am I passionate? I will say that I love world travel, particularly European travel, and I did a lot of that when I was younger. Then I got into raising my family, and we did a lot sort of more mundane trips. And I'm kind of, my kids are about to, my last kid is about to head off to college in a year, and I'm looking forward to sort of doing that again and to be past COVID and all that stuff. So I that's a passion for me, to the extent, and it's one that's sort of I haven't been focused on in a while, but I'd like to get back to. I keep thinking about a lot around how much I enjoy that and doing that again, basically.
Nice.
So that's something.
Yeah, that's been a passion of mine as well. Is like, I love international travel. I particularly like Southeast Asia, and that has been fun. But in general, like, this year we made it out to the national parks, etc. Just getting out and kind of seeing different places is great. So, I'm going to move to the news, right?
The news.
Weekly, we like to cover multi-cloud kind of happenings and topics. I think if you haven't read it, everyone should, immediately go to their Googles and Google up the HashiCloud multi-cloud or HashiCorp multi-cloud report. Most of you guys are familiar with Hashi because of what they do from a tooling perspective to integrate disparate infrastructure, and they do so really well. I think what's interesting is we're finally starting to see, I think this is their first report, we're seeing like where they think the market's going. So, research like this is always interesting to us because we're like, well, what do they think, right? And David, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I thought it was a good report. I mean, there's some things that are sort of, not earth-shattering, but I think they're more confirmation of a trend, around what's happening with multi-cloud, and a lot of that's the sort of consistent with what we were talking about earlier, which is this notion that it's going from sort of a trivial definition, which is more, 2+ clouds, and kind of at the enterprise level, it's like, well, maybe that's important, maybe that's not, to more specifics around what's really happening down at the lower levels in the organization, which is kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? So I thought it was a good report. I didn't spend a ton of time with it. I kind of have to go back and look at it again, but I thought, the findings were on. I thought it, sort of the knock on it was sort of self-serving, and that's true of almost any report any organization produces, right?
Yeah.
It's like, why would you publish something that makes you look bad?
I think with that last comment in mind, the other thing that was interesting this week is that Facebook, everybody's most popular social media network, has published a transparency report, as they call it. I think there's some questions there, and it's proved that the Green Bay Packers and cat videos are yet the most popular content on the internet. And I just, why did we have to publish a report for that? I think that was just a well-known fact.
It's one of those duh moments, right? Duh,
Yeah. So I liked that. Kind of rounding up some other stuff. Cisco is kind of increasing their app monitoring portfolio focused on microservices. I think, if you have never tried to monitor some of your Lambda functions in a very meaningful way, including like application traceability, you know that there is significant challenge in doing so, right? And they've worked a long way towards this. But I think what's interesting is that every time a new technology comes out, someone has to go and figure out a new way to observe or monitor that technology.
Exactly right. And the thing is, it all changes so fast. A super quick story. We were talking, I won't say where. I said I've been involved in some acquisition stuff, but and I'm not going to say where. But anyway, we're looking at some technologies, and the like sort of lead technical person said, I think we missed the boat here. We just have to partner with somebody, with some of the new players.
Right.
And I said, well, and he says, it's like. And I said, asked him what the legacy was and who the new players were. And he mentioned two companies in terms of legacy, and they had only been on the market about 5 years. So I was like, whoa, that's incredible, because that completely breaks all the venture capital models, right? It's like the whole venture capital model is you have something that breaks through and wins and stays in the king of the hill for like 20, 50 years, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, things move really fast.
Stamina and longevity. That's
the technical market is so fast. How things change.
And also apparently so are hackers. I think the other kind of interesting topic was out there. There's this Poly network, and if you steal $600 million from them, they will make you a leader in security. Is what I learned from reading that article. Which there are many ways to get jobs. I think that's probably one of the more novel ones that I've heard of. Right, like that gentleman got some recognition, and what's interesting is that there was a lot of confusion around how he did this and how he was able to be traced. And I think there's still a lot of folks that don't really understand how cryptocurrencies work, that there is traceability that is part of the network, right? You can have some independence, but when you're moving large amounts of money, someone's going to notice somewhere.
That's one of the hackers are one of those trends where you go, it's like you look at it and you're like, wow, where is this going? Because this is sort of like one of these global trends now that just like, because they have safe havens in certain countries, right? It's like,
right.
It's like the deal they have in Russia is like, you can live here, but don't hack here, and you can hack anywhere else.
Right. And, since blockchain is a decentralized format, that means that there's registers everywhere. At some point, someone's going to pick up what you're doing with $600 million.
Yeah.
The other two things I wanted to point out were an interesting project has gotten its wings over in the Cloud Native Foundation, and that is that project called CADA. And keeping an eye on all things multi-cloud. The interesting kind of project here is that it's focused on scaling for K8s. And if you guys have not written, programmatically into your code auto scaling capability, this looks to maybe add it, which I think is another, as we see this marketplace evolving for multi-cloud, another area of key function overall. Any thoughts?
Yep. Yeah, no, I think, this goes back to the idea that, it's like every time we build a new stack, you have to rebuild everything that went around that stack. And that's true. It's I remember when PagerDuty came on the market, and this is reinventing the help desk function, right? It's like, it was like we just keep doing it over and over, right? It's so it's just sort of an evolution, right? And sort of then you'll start to get stable, and there'll be the next thing, and we'll just keep marching on. It's like and it's all goodness. I mean, all of this stuff. It's like looking at some, like the railroad tracks that sort of seem to converge at infinity, right? It's like it's the same idea, which is like you keep approaching it, but you never reach it, right? You never reach stability because there's always a next thing. And all those next things are good things. There's nothing wrong with them, right? They do add something, but it just means you always have to keep advancing the ball, right? Because you never reach the end.
What is that old thing called? The capability maturity model, CMMI, right? Sort of. I remember that from days past. Well, David, believe it or not, you spent 30 minutes chatting about research and interesting stuff dealing with multi-cloud. I wanted to thank you for joining, and especially since you're in a much earlier time zone, thanks for getting up. And look forward to continuing our collaboration, and take care.
Thanks for having me. It was fun.
All right.